The World War II superstars Andrews sisters sold 75 million recordings. However, in 1953, Patty Andrews betrayed her sisters in the most heinous manner imaginable. She not only resigned, but she also filed a lawsuit against them, seized their inheritance, and never communicated with them again. However, that act of betrayal was only the beginning. From covert overdoses to betrayal in marriages. The bleak narrative of how America's beloved singing triumvirate annihilated one another is as follows. The Andrews sisters were raised in a household where music and hardship were inextricably linked. Peter Andreas, their father, had emigrated from Greece in order to establish a new existence in Minneapolis. He initially secured employment at an ice cream factory and subsequently set up a restaurant. It was there that he encountered Olga Soli, a Norwegian woman who was raised in the Lutheran faith. Initially, her family was opposed to the union. However, they gradually began to reconsider their stance after Laverne was born in 1911. The family's existence was never straightforward. Peter and Olga lost their second child, Anglin, at the age of 8 months prior to the birth of Maxine in 1916. Their daughter's upbringing was significantly influenced by that loss. Laverne, Maxine, and Patty were lavished with attention, particularly in the realm of music. The sisters spent countless hours singing together from a young age. The youngest two emulated Laverne's piano playing. The Boswell sisters, a jazz trio renowned for their playful rhythms and close harmonies, were a favorite among them. They emulated their icons, analyzed their recordings, and discovered their own voices in the process. No, singing was not merely an enjoyable pastime for them. It served as their path to progress. Their father's restaurant was unable to endure the Great Depression. The family encountered a challenging reality due to the absence of a consistent source of income. At that time, the sisters made a decision that would significantly alter their lives. They performed wherever they could, taking their music on the road. Silent movie theaters, school concerts, and vaudeville performances. They sang at any location that had a stage. They scarcely managed to survive on certain nights. However, their voices sustained them. The Andrews sisters were established during the final days of vaudeville. They were born in Minneapolis to Greek-Norwegian parents and developed an obsession with the Boswell sisters, a harmony group that was prominent in the 1920s. Olga, their mother, recognized their potential and urged them to pursue music. A moment that altered everything occurred in 1931 when they emerged victorious in a talent contest held at the Orpheum Theater. This triumph prompted them to join Larry Rich's traveling vaudeville troupe, which immediately immersed them in the challenging realm of live entertainment. There was no simple way to succeed in vaudeville. Patty Andrews subsequently stated that performers would do whatever it took to advance. In fact, some even attempted to undermine each other. However, the sisters viewed each obstacle as an opportunity to learn. They acquired the ability to engage an audience, enhance their act with humor, and refine their harmonies. The performers they would become were influenced by the early years on the road. They began touring with RKO's unit shows in the early 1930s, performing in theaters throughout the Midwest. Movies were rapidly replacing vaudeville by that time. Maxine later jokingly suggested that they must have closed every RKO theater in the Midwest. A reminder of the number of locations in which they had performed. They continued to advance, incorporating their signature harmonies with jazz music, despite the industry's evolution. While they were unaware of it, their significant moment was imminent. In 1937, they recorded Bemer bist du schön, a melody that was originally composed in Yiddish for a 1932 musical. The lyrics were translated into English by Sammy Cahn and Saul Chaplin. And Jack Kapp, the head of Decca Records, decided to take a risk on the sisters. The tune gained immense popularity within days of its release, immediately following Christmas. It was the most frequently played song on New York radio by New Year's Eve. The Andrews sisters became the first female group to achieve this milestone by selling more than 1 million copies. However, they were only compensated $50 due to a defective contract, despite the song's immense popularity. The song was not only a success, it was ubiquitous. It was worldwide in popularity, even in Nazi Germany, due to its catchy melody and swing rhythm, until its Jewish origins were discovered and it was prohibited by officials. However, it propelled the sisters to fame in the United States. Their harmonies were not merely blended, they imitated instruments by layering their voices in a manner reminiscent of a brass section in a jazz band. Their distinctive sound distinguished them and established them as pioneers of the jazz era. Their decision to join Decca in 1937 proved to be one of the most astute of their careers. This led them to collaborate with Vic Schoen, a talented arranger who played a significant role in the formation of their sound. He encouraged them to explore intricate harmonies and novel rhythms, and the outcomes were unforgettable. They have recorded over 400 compositions and sold over 80 million records during their career. They demonstrated that they were capable of performing more than just swing with songs such as Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, Beer Barrel Polka, and Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree. They were capable of performing jazz, boogie woogie, and even calypso. Their voices were frequently described by critics as resembling three trumpets performing in perfect harmony. Their recordings were not the only thing that was influenced by their partnership with Schoen. Additionally, his compositions provided them with an advantage on live radio, especially on programs such as Glenn Miller's Chesterfield Show, where they seamlessly transitioned between upbeat swing numbers and poignant ballads. The Andrews Sisters were not limited to singing during World War II. When the world was uncertain, they provided soldiers with a reason to grin. Laverne, Maxine, and Patty Andrews were referred to as America's wartime sweethearts due to the fact that their music provided solace to those who were fighting in distant locations. Their compositions were not mere successes. They became a part of the conflict itself, uplifting spirits and reminding people of the cause for which they were fighting. Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, one of their most renowned compositions, recounted the tale of a soldier who was drafted into the army and was a jazz enthusiast. It was impossible to remain seated due to its infectious rhythm. At canteens, soldiers danced to it, played it in their quarters, and carried it with them wherever they went. Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, another popular song, encapsulated the yearning of couples who were separated by conflict. It was not solely music. It represented a connection to one's homeland. The sisters did not conclude their efforts with the recording of tunes. They implemented an action plan. They became members of the United Service Organization, USO, and entertained forces throughout the nation. They entertained soldiers who were in need of respite from the brutal realities of war by singing, dancing, and spending time with them. They performed at the Hollywood Canteen as volunteers, where they also served food, engaged in conversation with servicemen, and ensured that all patrons felt at home. Their vitality was boundless. They have even recorded any bonds today to encourage Americans to support the war effort by purchasing war bonds. Hollywood promptly acknowledged the situation. They were featured in Buck Privates in 1941, alongside Abbott and Costello. The film was an ideal blend of patriotism, music, and comedy. One scene in particular stood out. The sisters, who were dressed in military uniforms, performed Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy in front of a room filled of soldiers. Electricity was the source of vitality. The Andrews Sisters were transformed into national icons as a result of the film's enormous success, which earned over $4 million. Audiences were able to escape the tension of war through the use of humor and music in subsequent films, including Private Buckaroo and In the Navy. These films were not merely for entertainment. They maintained a high level of morale and served as a reminder that there was still pleasure to be discovered, even in the face of adversity. However, the Andrews Sisters were not merely singing about conflict, they were also participating in it. They traveled to active combat zones to perform for soldiers between 1941 and 1945. They traveled to Italy and North Africa in 1944, occasionally performing within a few miles of enemy lines. They did not vacillate, despite the fact that the risk was genuine. They were aware of the significance of their music to the combatants. Maxine Andrews will always remember a single instant. She recalled singing Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree to young men on the Seattle docks as they prepared to sail out to the Pacific. A significant number of them never returned. Hearing the Andrews Sisters was more than a mere performance for those soldiers. It served as a reminder of the life they were striving to preserve, as well as their home and family. USO shows had reached more than 16 million servicemen and women by the conclusion of the conflict. The Andrews Sisters were instrumental in that endeavor. They sacrificed their own comfort in order to ensure that no soldier felt neglected, traveling non-stop. They gave everything they had. The Andrews Sisters were at the pinnacle of the music industry by the mid-1940s. They were one of the most successful acts in American history due to their lively performances and close harmony vocal abilities. They achieved a weekly income of $20,000 at their most prosperous, which would be more than $300,000 in the present day. They have sold more than 90 million records and recorded more than 600 tracks, including Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, Rum and Coca-Cola, and Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree. Their partnership with Bing Crosby resulted in 47 recordings, 23 of which were certified as Billboard successes. In addition, they appeared in 17 Hollywood films and hosted their own radio programs on CBS and ABC. An era was defined by their music. Their compositions served as a source of inspiration for both civilians and soldiers during World War II. They traveled with the United Service Organizations, USO, and entertained forces worldwide. Fake labels were even used to import some of their records into Nazi Germany. Their voices provided solace during a period of ambiguity. However, the situation was not as flawless as it appeared from the outside. Patty Andrews, the youngest member of the group and the lead vocalist, was known for her outgoing and bright demeanor. Maxine, the middle sister, was more business-oriented and serious. Their disparities resulted in frequent disputes, which extended beyond music to encompass a wide range of topics, including financial decisions and fashions. Maxine once stated that they were as dissimilar as three sisters could be, and that the music was the sole factor that kept them together. In 1941, tensions escalated when Maxine secretly married their manager, Lou Levy. She concealed it for a period of time, confiding in only Patty. The disclosure of the truth resulted in a profound rift within the family. Patty made a decision that stunned everyone a decade later, in 1951. She departed to pursue a solitary career without informing her sisters. The Andrews sisters experienced a complete breakdown, and they were unable to communicate for a period of 2 years. Laverne Andrews, the eldest sister, made every effort to maintain the group's unity throughout the ordeal. She frequently intervened to alleviate tensions, maintaining a composed demeanor. She ensured that they maintained their focus and oversaw numerous daily operations. However, she encountered her own obstacles. In 1948, she married musician Lou Rogers. Despite the increasing challenges, she remained committed to the group. Swing music was ubiquitous during the 1930s and early 1940s. It became the soundtrack of World War II, filling dance halls and playing on every radio. Soldiers marched off to war with the sound of swing in their ears, and couples danced to it before bidding farewell. Everything began to undergo a transformation. The music scene's once dominant bands were unable to endure, and a new sound began to emerge. Money was one of the most significant factors. Travel was highly restricted by the government during the conflict. Touring became challenging due to the scarcity of rubber and the rationing of petrol. Subsequently, in 1944, a 30% tax was implemented on dance venues, which further complicated the performance of large orchestras. A significant number of musicians had also been drafted, resulting in the absence of important players in bands. Some individuals never returned. The conclusion of the conflict marked the transition of America into a new era. Individuals desired something novel, something that did not evoke memories of years marked by sacrifice and loss. Swing, which was once the beating pulse of the nation, began to appear to be no longer relevant. Simultaneously, singers were emerging as the new idols. Vocalists were not impacted by the musicians' strike that occurred from 1942 to 1944, which prevented instrumentalists from recording new music. This represented an enormous advantage for artists such as Frank Sinatra. Big band conductors were no longer the focal point of attention by the late 1940s. Instead of full orchestras, audiences were attracted to solo performers. Additionally, smaller bands became more practicable. They were more cost-effective to operate and more convenient to reserve, and they were compatible with the emerging musical genres. Bebop, a jazz style that prioritized individual musicians over large ensembles, was developing in prominence. It was characterized by its rapidity and intricacy. Subsequently, rhythm and blues began to emerge, establishing the foundation for an even greater phenomenon, rock and roll. Swing's influence on popular music had diminished by the early 1950s. Young individuals desired an alternative. Loud and thrilling, rock and roll was. It possessed a fresh vitality and lacked the polished, controlled sound of swing. Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly were emerging artists who revolutionized the music industry. The entertainment industry was also transformed by television. The popularity of swing had been thriving in live dance halls, however, television favored solo performers and smaller bands. Swing was experiencing difficulty in maintaining pace with the world's progress. The Andrews sisters were among the few artists who experienced this transition with the same intensity. During the war, Patti, Maxine, and Laverne were superstars, selling millions of records and providing soldiers with music to endure the bleak days. Their harmony was impeccable. Their compositions, such as Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, became wartime anthems, and their performances were characterized by an abundance of energy. However, their music began to diminish from the charts following the conclusion of the conflict. They endeavored to remain current by incorporating novel designs. They were the first artists at Decca Records to produce a gospel album in 1950. However, their core audience was transitioning, and their most significant successes were behind them. Sparrow in the Treetop, a duet with Bing Crosby, was their final significant success in 1951. It was enjoyable and memorable, and it peaked at number 8 on Billboard's Best Sellers chart. However, the music industry was undergoing a transformation, and novelty compositions such as this no longer had the same influence. Subsequently, the sisters encountered difficulty in identifying an additional significant strike. In 1953, Patti Andrews made a decision that sent shockwaves through the music industry. She departed from the Andrews sisters in order to go it alone. The situation was further exacerbated by the fact that her sisters, Maxine and Laverne, learnt of the situation through gossip columns in the newspapers, rather than through a sincere conversation. The betrayal was profoundly painful, and the consequences were immediate. The sisters conversed sparingly for 2 years. Their once impregnable bond, which had been established over years of performing together, appeared to be irreparable. Patti had previously considered pursuing a solo career, recording tracks such as I Can Dream, Can't I, and I Wanna Be Loved. However, those songs were still published under the Andrews sisters' name, with Maxine and Laverne providing backup vocals. The experience of operating entirely independently was distinct. It was not merely a career decision, it was a declaration of independence. The timing exacerbated the extent of the agony. The sisters were emotionally devastated by the passing of their parents, Olga in 1948 and Peter in 1949, who had passed away just 1 year apart. Moreover, their longtime arranger, Vic Schoen, had departed, and their relationship was already being strained by conflicts over creative control and money. Subsequently, Patti acknowledged that the tension had become intolerable. In a 1971 interview, she stated that we had been inseparable for nearly our entire lives. We were perpetually at odds with one another. Maxine and Laverne endeavored to persist as a duo, even touring Australia. However, it was evident that something was lacking. The Andrews sisters were not merely a collection of individuals. They formed a cohesive unit. Furthermore, it was not the same without Patti. Their dissolution was not merely another instance of an ensemble disbanding. It was a harrowing illustration of the way in which ambition, familial loyalty, and miscommunication can collide, resulting in a resentment that can never be entirely forgotten. The sisters' disagreement was not solely due to Patti's decision to pursue a solo career. The situation was further exacerbated by her marriage to Walter Weskler in 1952. Prior to becoming Patti's spouse, Weskler served as the group's pianist. He was appointed as their manager shortly thereafter. Controversy ensued regarding his management of the sisters' professional career. He advocated for Patti to receive a higher salary than Maxine and Laverne, contending that she was the celebrity. A profound rift was established as a result of this financial favoritism. Weskler also supported Patti's aspirations to pursue a solo career, motivating her to withdraw from the group. Maxine publicly attributed the separation to him, and their dispute was not confined to their personal lives. The relationship was further disintegrated by the onset of lawsuits, which led to additional legal disputes. Years later, Patti offered her husband's defense, asserting that he had consistently prioritized her welfare. However, it was undeniable that his involvement had irrevocably altered the family dynamic. Patti and Weskler maintained their marriage for nearly 60 years, despite the turmoil, until his passing in 2010. In a sense, he was the sole constant in her life. However, his legacy in the Andrews sisters' narrative was significantly more intricate. Patti achieved success independently as a result of his financial decisions and management style. However, his family would never completely recover. The sisters' relationship was further strained by the passing of their parents, as if the situation was already chaotic. The estate was the subject of a legal dispute following their deaths, and Patty filed a lawsuit against Laverne in order to secure a larger portion of the inheritance. Maxine was devastated. The prospect of challenging each other in court over money seemed to be the ultimate act of betrayal after all they had experienced. The circumstances could not have been more unfavorable. Maxine and Patty were both in the process of divorcing, and their careers were already in decline following the dissolution. The family was not the only one divided by the lawsuit. It devastated their public image. The Andrews sisters were, to the world, emblems of harmony, the sweethearts of World War II who maintained a high level of morale through their upbeat melodies and close harmonies. Currently, fans were perusing articles regarding litigation and disputes that were exceedingly contentious. The contrast was devastating. Even though she frequently assumed the role of a peacemaker, she was unable to halt the destruction. Even as the years progressed, the litigation served as an additional impediment to the sisters' reconciliation. Despite their success, which included the sale of more than 75 million records, their narrative was evolving into one of unresolved grievances and missed opportunities. Then, in 1954, an event occurred that caused widespread consternation. Maxine was hospitalized after ingesting 18 sleeping tablets. The official narrative was that it was an accident, however, there were numerous skeptics. The financial disputes, the weight of losing her sister to a solo career, and the crumbling of everything they had constructed together had taken their toll. She had been on tour with Laverne just 1 year prior, endeavoring to preserve their act. Personal demons in a hospital bed. Fans were taken aback by the information. Maxine was a member of one of the most cherished musical groups in the United States. The revelation that she was experiencing difficulties behind the scenes served as a stark reminder that fame does not provide protection from sorrow. In 1956, they resolved to reconcile. It was an opportunity to reclaim the success they once enjoyed, but the music industry had undergone significant changes. The charts were dominated by younger performers such as Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry, as rock and roll had taken over. Capitol Records, where Patty was already a solo artist, engaged the sisters. They attempted to adjust their music by incorporating light rock influences. However, the Andrews sisters' previous sound was desired by the audience. They recorded 3 albums and a dozen singles between 1956 and 1959, including one that features arrangements of 1920s compositions by Billy May. None of them had a significant impact. They continued to attract admirers and performed at prestigious venues such as Las Vegas and London theaters. However, their tenure as chart-topping artists was concluded. Furthermore, the previous tensions between them were never entirely resolved. The reunion was a difficult experience, and it was evident that their status in the music industry was diminishing. Then, in 1966, everything underwent a significant transformation. Laverne was diagnosed with liver cancer. She was only 55 years old. She had always been the steadfast force that had kept them together as the eldest sister. She was not merely a voice in their harmony. Their music was enriched by her resonant contralto. However, she was also responsible for preventing the dissolution of Patty and Maxine. For as long as she could, Laverne maintained the confidentiality of her illness. When she was unable to continue performing, the Andrews sisters ceased to exist. On May 8, 1967, she passed away at her residence in Brentwood, California. There was no longer any group to be saved in her absence. They had sold nearly 100 million records and received 19 gold discs. However, their tenure as a triumvirate was concluded. Patty and Maxine endeavored to maintain their relationship, however, it was not the same. Laverne had served as the adhesive that maintained their unity. The old tensions between them only grew worse without her. In 1973, they reunited for Over Here, a Broadway production that was inspired by World War II nostalgia and showcased a number of their most beloved songs. It was a triumph, however, nothing had changed in the background. Both sisters continued to perform in their respective styles following the conclusion of the performance. Maxine was successful in musical theater, starring in productions such as Swingtime Canteen, while Patty appeared on television and cruise ships. However, their relationship was never completely reconciled, despite the occasional collaboration, such as when they were honored with a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame in 1987. Maxine passed away at the age of 79 in 1995. Patty, the final surviving sister of Andrews, survived until 2013, when she reached the age of 94. Their tenure as a collective had concluded years prior, however, their music endured. The world was reminded of an era that they had once defined by songs such as Rum and Coca-Cola and Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, which still reverberated from the past. Patty Andrews harbored a regret that she refused to relinquish. She regretted not reconciling with her sister, Maxine, prior to her death in 1995. However, she consistently arrived at the same conclusion, regardless of the extent of her contemplation. Their differences were too profound to be reconciled. Neither of them was aware of how to repair the harm that had been inflicted by their feud for decades. In the final 2 decades of Maxine's existence, they encountered each other only twice. Maxine suffered a heart attack in 1982, which was the initial instance. The second was in 1987, when they were awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. However, they scarcely engaged in conversation even then. Their relationship had been perpetually convoluted. Patty once stated that Maxine had been an issue since her birth. She declined to provide additional information, as she desired to safeguard the Andrews sisters' public image. Maxine's perspective differed. She described their relationship as affectionate, yet it was oppressive. The 3 sisters had spent virtually every moment together. They resided, traveled, and performed together. There was no room to exhale, no way to retreat. Their issues were not limited to mere personality conflicts. A dispute over inheritance resulted in a rift between them following the deaths of their parents in the late 1940s. A few years later, Patty made a decision that fundamentally altered the course of events. She embarked on a solitary journey in 1951 without informing her sisters. Maxine and their eldest sibling, Laverne, experienced feelings of betrayal. They continued to perform as a group intermittently, however, the situation was never the same. In 1975, they were reunited by Over Here, a Broadway production. It was intended to be a new beginning, however, it proved to be the conclusion. Another acrimonious fallout resulted from a salary dispute. This time, there was no turning back. Patty refrained from attending the memorial service following Maxine's passing in 1995. She was deeply saddened, but she had never imagined that reconciliation was feasible. She maintained that sentiment until her passing in 2013 at the age of 94. Maxine harbored her own remorse. She discussed the influence of fame on their relationship in her later years. She acknowledged that they harbored profound affection for one another, but they encountered difficulties in maintaining a harmonious relationship. Their rapid ascent to fame was both swift and overwhelming. They became some of the most prominent performers of their era, with over 75 million records sold and hits such as Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. Nevertheless, the strain was immense behind the scenes, despite the fact that their music lifted spirits during World War II. Their performances were consistent. They were never separated. The conflicts between them were not solely due to Patty's solo career. The tension was further exacerbated by disputes regarding money and management decisions. Maxine encountered her own personal battles. Despite the fact that she never publicly disclosed her sexual orientation, she engaged in romantic relationships with women during a period in which it was not widely accepted. There are those who contend that this experience exacerbated her feelings of estrangement from Patty. Maxine continued to take pride in their accomplishments, despite the circumstances. However, she never ceased to harbor the desire for a different outcome. She stated, "I wish I had the capacity and authority to reconcile the rift between my sister and me." The Andrews sisters' narrative is both uplifting and harrowing. They emerged from a small Minnesota town to become one of the most successful musical ensembles in history. Having recorded more than 600 tracks, they achieved over 100 chart hits and established an entire epic. However, the melody concealed a family that never achieved genuine tranquility. The commencement of the end was symbolized by Laverne's passing in 1967. She had served as the consistent intermediary between Maxine and Patty. Their relationship gradually unraveled in her absence. By the time Maxine passed away, there was nothing left to be resolved. The years of separation had caused an inordinate amount of harm.